So this week, Russ, I stopped listening to podcasts and started listening to music on my commute to work.
Oh, why was that?
I don't know. I just kind of didn't want to hear the podcast anymore. I think I really started doing that because of the Same Difference guys. You know, I wanted to keep up with those podcasts. So I just started listening to them.
Right.
And I picked up a lot of other ones. And now they're not recording anymore, which is really sad. We missed them a lot. I'm just hearing all this like political stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to hear this anymore. The music kind of puts me in a better mood. So I was going back and listening to all these older recordings that some of them we've talked about and some I haven't even gotten to that I had in my collection. It's been pretty great. I'm feeling really good. I think it's going to be the best podcast ever because my mood has been elevated by all those musical rides to work.
I think you can definitely have too much information.
Yes, you can.
But you can't have too much music, really.
You really can't. Although you could have so much music that you're not really hearing it anymore, I guess.
That's a problem sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of just goes by you. You know, something amazing, and then you don't hear it, you know.
My problem, after we've been doing this podcast for this is the 5th year now.
Oh, wow.
Is that I feel like I don't have enough time to go back and listen to the music that I like already.
Yeah.
Because I'm spending all this time listening to new music every week.
I've got that too. Like I ride a bicycle to work and I have those like Bose Soundwear kind of things and they don't make them anymore. So the battery doesn't really recharge for a long time anymore because it's really old. You know how they make things like it's all like molded in silicon. You can't take it off. So I can't change the battery. And now they don't make this anymore. So I'm stuck with it. And it's kind of, but it still sounds great. Got a lot of wear and tear.
Well, as long as it puts you in a good mood for a little while longer on your commute.
It does. I actually can't wait to leave work so I can hear music again. It's probably not the right attitude, but...
one of the benefits of going home.
Yeah. And going to work.
Well, you're listening to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 212. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
Before we get into our new releases this week, I want to send out a thanks to Art Rojo, the Danish bass and drum duo, for sharing our episode from last week. We featured their recording that featured Barry saxophonist Aske Dresbeck, and that's what it's called, Art Rojo serving Aske Dresbeck. They sort of feature other performers with their unique backing style. Some great jazz from Denmark. We loved that Barry sax sound. If you haven't heard it, be sure to go back and check that out from last week's episode.
I like that. It's just a love fest all around. We love them. They love us. It's just really great.
And this week we've got a really interesting program, both in classical and on the jazz side. And in the episode description, you can find links for all of the recordings we're going to talk about. There's Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music there. Plus, at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. If you can't see the links or description clearly wherever you're listening to us, you can always come over to our host site. That's Podbean, podbean.com. Everything is easy to follow there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you enjoy listening to us, and tell a music-loving friend. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and that's another way we can get new listeners. You can come and follow us on Facebook as well. We've got a page over there. Get extra info and more new releases during the week. I put up a bunch from Friday there. You can leave a message or comment if you like. Follow us on X as well. We're Adult Music Pod over there. I post the new episodes there. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, our email address is adultmusicpodcast, that's all one word, @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We had some new listener in the Netherlands this week, Mike, who's been downloading like crazy.
Well, keep doing it. We really love seeing those downloads.
Yeah. I'm always interested to see what countries are downloading our episodes.
Yeah. I'll sometimes check that site, too. It's pretty interesting. It's mostly the U.S., by the way. Here we are in Japan, yet we have the biggest audience in the U.S., and we have no American advertisers yet.
I think, like we said before, people in the U.S. are into podcasts probably because they have to listen to something on their commutes.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Europeans, they don't really listen to them as often because I try to get like some foreign language podcasts to listen to. There really aren't that many, or at least that I know of. So,
and as we go through our discussion, we're going to play music samples as usual. And this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And no better place to start than with Bach and the classical side, Mike.
Yeah, Bach's always a good bet for the Baroque side. And this is a rather big recording, Bach's Mass in B minor. It's a 2-CD set. Now, we usually don't do these, but I had some free time this week. I decided this would be the week to do it. Released on April 4th on the Harmonia Mundi label. This is by Pygmalion with Raphaël Pichon as the conductor and features the soloists Julie Rosé on soprano, Beth Taylor, mezzo-soprano, Lucille Richardot, who we just heard 2 weeks ago, as the alto, Emiliano Gonzalez Toro, a tenor that I like a lot, and Christian Imler, bass. I wanted to do this despite its length because they did a recording of the Monteverdi Vespers that I really loved. I think we both really liked it.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago. And then they did that Mozart Requiem that we heard last year. I was like, man, this ensemble is like firing on all cylinders. They've got something going on. And I really wanted to hear this very famous work and see what they would do with it. So how did you do with this? Is the length of it okay with you this week, or was it really rough going?
This is a busy time of year for me, so I've been spending every moment I have that I can spare for listening. I got through everything.
Yeah, the reason I picked it for this week, because it was released in April and it's now May, is because it was Golden Week in Japan. So we had
2 extra days.
2 extra days off. It's like Thanksgiving in the U.S. You get those 2 extra days, or sometimes even more, depending on when they fall. So I was able to listen to the entire thing on one of those days off, and it was really great. It turned out it was a good idea to program it because this is a pretty great recording too, though it's not a new benchmark, I would say, although it's up there in the top recordings. So I'll just give the game away right away. So in the booklet note, Pichon writes a highly dedicated, enthusiastic segment, making me sure of his total commitment to the performance. And you get the impression he's like that with all of Pygmalion's performances or anything he conducts. So this work starts CD 1, and if you're streaming, this is divided into 2 CDs on streaming as well, though it will play continuously. The tracks are the same, so you have CD 2 track 1 on streaming as well as on the physical release, so that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so we have CD 1, Part 1, Missa, Kyrie and Gloria, so this is the entire CD, that section, and track 1 is Kyrie eleison, so Lord have mercy. And right away, I love the spacious sound of the choir. You can hear between the individual singers. There's like a nice transparency to the recording. And the first thing you hear is this. Let me just sample the way this opens. All right, now I'm going to sample a bit of that as it gets going later. The fugue comes in next. So the tempo, you'll notice, is on the slow side, but it all has an appealing flow to it, and you also want to notice how it came in. It had sort of a soft-toned, cushioned attack. It just didn't explode on like performances of this work usually do. I'm thinking of the John Elliott Gardner one from way, way back. I don't remember when that was released, maybe the 90s. He's actually done 3 recordings of it. So I'm talking about the first one on Archive Productions. Okay, we're going to get a lot of detail out of this performance. I want to also sample the opening of the Kyrie fugue. We heard the beginning of the instrumental part. I'm going to sample from the part where the voices come in, and we'll hear the entry of 3 of the voices. This is from around the 2-minute and 35-second mark. And you'll notice the voices come in from bottom to top, and I really enjoyed that as well. And there's something about the tempo that when you're used to a faster tempo and you hear it a little slower like this, it makes it sort of hypnotic. You're kind of like, really absorbing a lot of sound. The movement is given a bit of a mournful quality at this tempo too, and I love the sumptuousness of the sound. It's got a sensual quality in this performance. Okay, we get to one of my favorite movements in the work, right at track 2, Christe eleison, Christ have mercy. And this is a solo for Julie Rosé, the soprano, and Beth Taylor, the mezzo-soprano. The tempo is on the slow side, but this is a joyful movement, and that joy can't be repressed by a slow tempo. Let's hear the gorgeous entry of the two soloists singing in harmony, so I'm going to skip ahead to their entry. The definition on both voices is really exquisite. Both of them come out very clearly. You can follow them easily.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, the vocalists go for a more modern, almost operatic approach to the vocals. So they're singing in full voices and apply vibrato to sustained notes. I guess I'm just used to hearing this sung without vibrato these days, but it works really well in this style. I'm unfamiliar with these particular vocalists, but I like what I'm hearing. Track 3, Kyrie eleison 2, and this sounds from the bowels of the orchestra and rises from the lowest to highest voices. It's given a very somber tone in this particular performance. Then we get to the Gloria, track 4. The rest of the tracks on CD1 are all the Gloria prayer. It starts Gloria in excelsis Deo. After the somber Kyrie movements, we get some speed here. And that's going to be one of the interpretational devices that Pichon uses. He's going to go like slow and then like surprisingly fast. And then there's going to be a lot of contrast between tempos. So let's hear how this comes in. All right, and that's half the track right there, so I'll have you listen to the rest of it on your own. Track 5, Et in terra pax, and on earth peace. The sudden shift to a slower tempo is appealingly made here. The movement features solemn singing from the choir, very church-sounding, in contrast to the more standout operatic singing we heard in the Christe eleison from the soloists. I like the ticking on each quarter note sounded by the staccato violins at the opening of the second minute. It adds some rhythmic definition to the flow, sounding like notches being cut into like a stick, if you could think of the flow of the music as being like a stick. It's kind of really a cool effect. I'm going to play that. This is going to start about 10 seconds earlier. Let's see. All right, I'm not picking up that quality in my headphones here in the sample, but I heard it on my stereo. I got good definition there. Track 6, Laudamus Te. This features Beth Taylor, the mezzo-soprano, solo. The texture lightens here to accommodate the solo voice. Pichon's pacing allows many details to emerge, including the false cadence leading up to the soloist's entry. And I want to hear Taylor's entry. I want to sample all of the individual voices on this recording. Let's hear the mezzo-soprano Beth Taylor. Okay, you can hear that operatic approach again. We heard the vibrato in the singing, and I think it's very effective. It's really emotional. Despite the operatic voice, she's not singing out operatically. I don't think the setting really allows for that. It's rather low-key, and she serves the text. At the 3-minute mark, there's an interesting pause where we think we're going to hear a repeat of the opening, and we do, but Taylor brings it in at a very fine pianissimo. It's very surprising. So a nice interpretational touch there by the mezzo-soprano. There's a quick crescendo to the volume we've been hearing, and it's an interesting touch. Track 7, Gratias Agimus Tibi. This section also rises from the choir's depths. Again, the slowish pacing allowed the music to provide a spark of electricity. It had me focusing on the harmony and the pacing itself. Timpani in the 2nd minute register well while remaining in the background, and brass sound out with a good balance. I'll let you sample this for yourself. Track 8, Dominus Deus, Julie Rosé, and Emiliano González Toro, who I really love. He's a tenor. And I like the lightness with which this comes in, the melody played by a flute with an appealing, cushioned tone. I'll sample a bit of the introduction and get the soloist voice's entries in too. Not very operatic there. It just sounds really good. The continuo is light here too, featuring a plucked gamba and lightly played theorbo. Julie Rosé's singing is particularly light and touching in the 2nd minute. Track 9, Qui tollis peccata mundi. The movement seamlessly comes in, with the chorus and tempo suddenly taking on a somber tone again. It seems Pichon's interpretation is leaning on the choir to provide the more somber sounds, and the soloists for the lighter moments. Or maybe that's Bach, and Pichon just realized it and interpreted it that way. Track 10, Qui sedes ad dextram patris. Okay, we're going to hear Lucille Richardot for the first time in the album. We heard her on the April 28th episode, Fluted Grooves, episode 210, when we discussed her album Northern Light, and here she is back again. She was with Ensemble Correspondance, directed by Sébastien Dausset on that album. We mentioned when we talked about that album that she can get into a countertenor range. Here she's on the edge of that, but she sounds more feminine here. It's a fascinating voice with a lot of surprising timbral varieties. Let's sample it. Track 11, Quoniam tu solus sanctus, and here we hear the last soloist, Christian Immler, the bass. His bass voice is introduced by low brass, really setting it off. It sounds like we're hearing a French horn or trombone at the beginning. Russ, you can help me identify this with your ear for the brass. I think it's a French horn, but let's listen.
Yeah, I had written horn solo in my notes. It has a bit of a rustic quality to it, though.
I suspect it could be that German horn that Brahms wrote his horn trio for. It's a period instrument, so
right.
There you go. I think it's an equivalent of a French horn, whatever that might be. The timbre of the voice and horn have substantial gravity and weight, as you heard. And then we get to the last track on CD 1, this is track 12, Cum Sancto Spiritu, with the Holy Spirit. The tempo suddenly speeds up in a sprint for the end of the Gloria. Pichon provides a lot of tempo contrast between the faster and slower movements, making that part of the expressive content of this performance. The choir sounds bright and athletic here. The voice is registering with great definition in their very fast lines. I'll leave listeners to sample this themselves. There's still a lot to hear on this album because we're going to CD 2, track 1. This is the second part of the Mass, Symbolum Nicenum. Credo, so the Nicene Creed, I believe in one God. Okay, Credo in unum Deum is the section of the Credo prayer in track 1. We have the organ in continuo here, and this section also moves quickly. I want to mention that's another thing this recording does. Keeps the continuo interesting by changing it up. Sometimes it's a theorbo, you get that plucked sound, and now it's an organ. And let's hear the opening. And that's half of that track already. It's pretty short. I want to mention that Deezer, which we're sampling from, has this labeled as CD2, and then they say track 13. Oh, they drive me crazy. Anyway, track 2 on the CD on CD2, or track 14, is Patrem Omnipotentem. The joy continues here, still with organ and continuo, playing staccato lines. The choir sounds vigorous in their melismatic singing. The section positively bounces. Track 3, Et in unum Dominum, Julie Rosé soprano and Lucille Richardot alto. That's an interesting pairing. Let's hear the way this starts. Yeah, now in this case, not only do we have good separation of voices, but they're in different channels, so it's really easy to separate them in your ear. Rosé's florid soprano is up front, and we hear Richardot more in her low countertenor sound. The pace itself is still on the fast side, though it's slowed down a bit from the previous two movements. It's got a cheerful bounce to it. This performance really brought a smile to my face. It communicates serenity in this track, CD 2, track 3, or 15 on streaming. Track 4, Et Incarnatus Est, a big tempo change here. This is played slowly, and the voices peek out of the shadows to wonder at the incarnation of Christ. The tempo is almost at a creeping pace here. The choral voices have an attractive bloom to them when they reach a peak at about 1 minute and 20 seconds. They gradually come in again, beginning at around 1 minute and 45 seconds. Track 5, Crucifixus. The opening is played with dramatic string slashes, and the choir comes in sounding severe with descending lines. There's a great momentary hush in the choir at 1 minute and 11 seconds that's got a bit of interpretative magic to it. It occurs again at 1 minute and 59 seconds. The movement ends at that pianissimo, and Jesus' life and light go out. It'll be inaudible if I sample it, so you have to hear this entire track for yourself, and make sure you're not in traffic when you hear it. Track 6, Et Resurrexit. This bursts out with absolute joy and energy, with quivering melisma in the held vowels. The choir is suitably excited about Jesus' resurrection. The woodwinds energetically and breathily chirp throughout the section, and I especially enjoyed the bass voices singing solo at the 2 minute and 8 second mark. Great energy in the orchestral playing throughout as well. The ending has some energetic brass and a warm final chord. Track 7, Et in Spiritum Sanctum Dominum. This features Christian Imler, the bass. This is a solo for him. Let's sample his very melodic entry.
Et in spiritum sanctum Dominum et vivificantem.
His voice rings out of the texture appealingly as he introduces belief in the Holy Spirit in that triplet rhythm. Very catchy. Track 8, Confiteor. The tempo is on the fast side here, but more standard as the choir confesses its belief in one baptism for the remission of sins. The writing is polyphonic between the individual sections of the choir and the continuo. The tempo suddenly moves to a largo for the ending Remissionem Peccatorum, or remission of sins. The last section has a slow rising pattern. Track 9, Et Expecto. Now on streaming, this is track 21. The last section explodes out of the gate with speed and vigor as the choir joyfully awaits the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. This section sort of bookends the credo section that the entire prayer began with in energy and length. It's just as brief as that first movement of the credo at under 2 minutes. And it ends with an emphatic Amen. Track 10, CD2 or 22. The Sanctus and Pleni sunt Caeli. I've always liked this movement. It's got a different profile here than from older recordings I'm familiar with, featuring floating voices at a slower tempo. At 3 minutes and 20 seconds, the Pleni sunt Celi section changes tempo and moves into a vigorous fugue. The tempo is fast, and the choir shows remarkable vigor and technique in keeping these intricate lines clear. Track 11, or 23. Osanna, Benedictus Agnus Dei, Dobe Nobis Pacem. This is the last section of the Mass, and this is the Osanna in Excelsis section. There's no pause between the Sanctus and Osanna, but despite the similar tempo, the change is noticeable due to the new theme. I got a lot of enjoyment out of the brisk, flowing tempo here. Yeah, great steady 3/4 pulse. Really drives this section. Track 12, Benedictus. And here we have Emiliano Gonzalez Toro's only solo vocal on the album. This has to be sampled, of course. This is track 12 or track 24 on streaming. I love this singer. He's very expressive, only through his tone, really. He's not doing a lot with vibrato and things like that. So he's got this very expressive tone and, I guess, way of shaping the line as well. Really enjoy his singing a lot. There's a long, gentle intro for the flute that sets a softer tone. I like Gonzalez Toro's sweet, higher range, which we hear a bit of at the end of the second minute. It's a gorgeous interpretation of this section of the Mass. Track 13, Osanna in Excelsis again. This returns, it's the same as track 11. And this bookends Gonzalez Toro's Solo Benedictus, sounding equally vigorous here. Track 14, the last section of the Mass, Agnus Dei, and this features Lucille Richardot, the alto, as the solo voice. It's the last solo we'll hear on the album. The tempo is slow and has a light treading quality to it. Richardot enters at about the 50-second mark, and that's where I'm going to start the sample. A lot of great held dissonances in that vocal there. She also manages to get her voice between that female alto and male countertenor sound. We heard her sounding more feminine at the beginning, and then when she gets down into some of those held dissonant tones, the tone changes. It gets a little more masculine. For the most part, she errs towards the male timbre here, but it keeps switching, making the performance fascinating. The tempo has the music sounding spacious, and Richardot manages some magical pianissimi in the third minute. Track 15, or 27 on streaming, Dona Nobis Pacem. The last section has a building line, played quietly and sung with church-like spirit by the choir. The performance comes across as warm and comforting until about the 2-minute and 47-second mark when timpani come in and there's a crescendo to some bolder, more confident singing. It's an ideal way to end the work and the album. So I won't go so far as to say this recording is a new benchmark as I did with Pygmalion's recording of the Monteverdi Vespers, but it's certainly at the top of the list of best performances. It takes a few chances, and all of them work, but I found myself still wanting to hear, for example, one of John Elliott Gardner's recordings of the work, and Masaaki Suzuki's, which I also enjoyed. For this performance, Pichon speeds up some tempos, slows down others, softens textures here, has them burst out there, plays pianissimo here, bursts out fortissimo there, so you're always made to hear each new section as though for the first time, and that's the magic of this interpretation. The performances are stellar. Lately, Pygmalion and the soloist Pichon has worked with have been creating wonders, and this is no exception. I've been following the releases of Lucille Richardot and Emiliano Gonzalez Toro pretty avidly apart from the ensemble, and was thrilled to hear both of them here. Julie Rosé's soprano singing also caught my ear, and mezzo Beth Taylor's early solo on Laudamus Te was fantastic. There are many magical moments on the album. I'm really hooked on this ensemble at the moment, and I'm already anticipating what they'll do next.
I've enjoyed all the releases we've heard from Pygmalion, and this was no exception. I have a few recordings of this work, and I found this performance to be overall measured, but consistently musical. Listening to a recording of a work this long, if there's anything out of balance, it will start to annoy you, and then it'll grow on you. But here, I just found it consistently enjoyable. The performances are well balanced in both the vocal parts and the instruments. The tempos are comfortable and well judged. I noticed the slower sections that you had pointed out.
Right.
The recording is exceptionally clear without excessive room ambience. It's just right. So it's easy to follow all of the parts in the compositions, in the instrumental parts as well. If something catches your ear, it doesn't get lost in any type of haze. And as you pointed out, the separation of the solo voices is excellent in the stereo mix, and I found that a highlight of enjoying the vocal part of the work.
Yeah, we certainly hope you're listening to the stereo version of this podcast, because you could hear all those stereo separations in your headphones. All right, our second classical album of the night is called Jewish Vienna. It's an album of songs by Zemlinsky, Grünfeld, Korngold, and a symphonic movement by Mahler, and one or two other tracks as well. This features Chen Reiss, the soprano. She's Israeli. The Jewish Chamber Orchestra Munich, conducted by Daniel Grossmann. This is on the Onyx label, and it came out on April 25th. All of the songs on the album are arranged by Talheim Samnon. Now, Daniel Grossmann wrote the booklet note, but gives very little information on the works on the album. He does mention that from the mid-19th century onwards, conditions in Vienna were rife for a remarkable flowering of Jewish art and culture to take place there. And this album showcases that. Gustav Mahler was the center of musical life in turn-of-the-century Vienna, and everyone else circulated around him, much like they do in this program, with the Adagio from Mahler's incomplete 10th Symphony as the centerpiece. Tracks 1 through 4, Alexander Zemlinsky's, songs from Walzergesänge nach toskanischen Volksliedern von Ferdinand Gregorovius, Opus 6. Did you get all that?
That's a mouthful, wow.
Yeah, boy. Track 1 is Liebe Schwalbe. This is a well-orchestrated, cheerful song. Chen Reiss's soprano rings out clearly on the recording. Let's hear this. It's a very short song, so I've got to get out of it there. But spring is in the air in that song, let me tell you. It's over very quickly, darting by like the swallow it's about. Track 2, Fensterlein, Nachts bist du zu. I'm really enjoying Reiss's phrasing and tone, and the clarity of the recording, picking up all the nuance in the orchestral timbres and the voice. In this era, sopranos got a high tessitura to sing in, and all of these works use that. Think about Strauss's 4 last songs, right? That soaring soprano voice. We're getting a bit of that here as well. Track 3, Blaues Sternlein. This one is a bit slower and provides contrast. It's also pretty brief, with a charming but brief flute interlude before the last 2 lines. These performances show Zemlinsky's songs in the best possible light. Track 4, Briefchen schrieb ich. This features booming timpani along with the vocal line. Let's get a sample of this. We hear a bit of that soaring soprano there. I really could have sampled the entire song. It's only a minute long. But I've got to give you something to go to, listeners. Track 5, Josephine Winther, Edel von Wigmar. Her composition, Im Buchenwald, or In the Beechwood. Josephine Winther had a considerable musical talent, but couldn't get a university degree in music as a woman in the late 1890s. Now, that Edel von Wigmar is a title. It's not a name. And it comes from a lung sanatorium and mobile epidemic laboratory that her husband founded with her money for the Red Cross. Apparently she inherited quite a bit. In 1942, she was deported to Theresienstadt, where she died in 1943 during World War II. It's a slow song with some interesting winds hidden in the thicket of strings in the orchestration. Let's hear some of Reiss's higher notes. This sort of high soprano sound was in the air back then. Yeah, Reiss sounds like right at home in these voices. Her voice is perfectly suited for this type of song. The composer, Josephine Winther, clearly knew her Wagner and Strauss. The track suddenly ends on the last syllable of the text. Track 6 through 9, a composer that I'm really glad has made a big comeback, Erich Wolfgang Korngold. Now, Americans knew his music from his early Hollywood soundtracks for Errol Flynn movies and that sort of thing. But he was an art composer too, especially in Vienna. And these are his 4 Lieder, or 4 Lieder, I guess you'd say in German, nach Shakespeare, Opus 31, which are all in English. So why not give it an English title? Because we get the original Shakespeare texts. Go figure. Korngold set these after folk songs. The first lyric is from Othello, and the other 3 are from As You Like It. So track 6, Desdemona's song, The Poor Soul Sat Sighing by a Sycamore Tree. Reiss sings the text with admirable expression. She sounds as good in English as she does in German, really. It's almost like she's bilingual. The pacing here is pretty brisk, and the song seems to go by quickly. Let's get a sample. And if you know the words, feel free to sing along, because it's a pretty famous text. Yeah, now if Othello had heard Desdemona singing like this, he wouldn't have killed her, so it's probably a good thing that Korngold came around so much later in history. Anyway, I found the second verse very appealing as far as its pacing and Korngold's writing go. Track 7, Under the Greenwood Tree. The bass strums chords as though it's a guitar. Let's hear that. Really beautiful song. The opening has that folk song quality, but we do get some high tessitura from Reiss before we're at the 30-second mark. Track 8, Blow, Blow, Thou Winter Wind. Again, at the opening, the folk song quality of the melody comes through. Fitting the text, the music has a chilly quality, underlined by a frequently sounding tympanum. The track flows by quickly, Grossmann always taking brisk, flowing tempos, making the songs sound like they're eager to arrive somewhere. And track 9, When Birds Do Sing. Reiss has a soprano with some body to it that nevertheless works well for this light vocal line, which requires some high notes but not much power. She could use more lightness and playfulness of feeling here, but that's not saying anything against this performance, which is very fine. Let's hear the opening.
It was a lover and his love's that o'er the green cornfield did pass, in the springtime, the springtime, the only pretty ringtime, the springtime, the only pretty ringtime. When birds do sing, ding-a-ding-a-ding, ding-a-ding-a-ding, sweet lovers, lovers, sweet hearts beat.
Actually, hearing that now, I'm wondering if it's possible to sing Korngold's line with any more lightness. Track 10, Gustav Mahler, Symphony No. 10 in F sharp, the first movement, Adagio. This is the only movement that Mahler completely orchestrated in this symphony before he died. It's 24 minutes long, and it starts with a weeping solo viola. Warm strings come in at the 1 minute and 19-second mark with a continuation of the opening. The string theme is put through a few rhythm changes as it goes on at the opening, and the solo viola is back with another lamenting theme in the 3rd minute. In fact, that solo viola is going to be sort of a key element in this movement. It comes back very often. String harmonies follow, and we hear a standout theme that will be repeated throughout the movement. Let me sample that. Yeah, those building, melting Mahlerian melodies. Brass comes in with thematic material, building up tension in the 6th minute as the violins go into their highest, most tragic range. A dancing rhythm comes in the 8th minute and suddenly stops as the viola returns for more solo soliloquizing. A section for wind and strings follows, sounding romantic, with a bit of harmonic irony set to the lightly dancing rhythm. Tension builds up at the 11 minute and 54-second mark and lets off so that we can hear fragments of the warmer theme we heard earlier in the sample. The more Viennese high string melodies and passing dance rhythms are well communicated by Grossmann and the orchestra, Grossmann doesn't go for excess heaviness here, rather pulling out the more Viennese cultural elements from the score and letting those guide the interpretation. This makes the flow of the movement seem fast, as is the case with most of the songs on the album as well. The orchestra sounds like it's on the smaller side. We can hear the harmonic detail clearly. The warm, romantic theme returns at the 15-minute and 21-second mark, and at 16 minutes and 50 seconds, tragedy suddenly strikes with a sudden outburst. A lot of anguish in that section. Now, this doesn't register as heavily as I've heard it elsewhere. A long-held wind note, and I can't tell the instrument here, sounds out over the orchestra for a long period of time. The viola theme is heard. It sounds more like a violin here, and probably is. It plays over the pizzicato rhythm set by cellos and bass. Familiar material from the earlier part of the movement comes back, but has a more forlorn tone here, as if remembering a happier memory while in a state of sadness. The movement sounds like it's ending by the 21-minute and 30-second mark, but the violin extends its solo melody, not resolving, but going back to the romantic theme by itself. It's pretty heartbreaking to hear it like this after we've heard the theme so sumptuously scored earlier in the first sample that we heard. The movement comes to a rather downcast end with the aid of the orchestra, which uplifts a bit. And we get to the other piece of bread in this sandwich. More songs by Korngold based on Shakespeare texts. Songs of the Clown, Opus 29. Track 11 is Come Away Death. It's from Twelfth Night, as are all of these songs. So Come Away Death has a solemn, attractive opening for winds. We're back in English here, of course. Reiss has an attractive tone here that can soar when necessary, though this song is rather understated. Yeah, Korngold knew the Viennese style well. Reiss is sensitive to the text, inflecting with emotion. Track 12, Oh Mistress Mine, a brighter sounding track. The structure is folk song-like. It's a touching lyric set in a folk song style with a bridge, which I've chosen to sample here. Track 13, Adieu, Good Man Devil. A very brief song with the orchestra mostly following the vocal line, and at times the vocal imitating glissando strings. It's charming and lively. Reiss brings some humor to it. Track 14, Hey Robin. This one is short too. It's got a bolder setting, portraying a robust character, and is rather straightforwardly performed here. Track 15, For the Rain, It Raineth Every Day. This has an interesting, unpredictable, and quickly changing vocal line. It straightens out for the end of verses, which are very attractive. Let's sample that so you can hear what I mean.
When that I was a little boy, a little tiny boy, we take all the wind in the rain, we take all the wind in the rain. A foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain, it
It's a really jumpy song, even in the orchestration. Reiss gets an opportunity here to show a lot of versatility, which he does. It sounds a hard song to pull off, as it seems to wander precociously, but it comes across well here. And finally, track 16, Alfred Grünfeld, Kleine Serenade, arranged by Nikolaus Hirsch. It's an instrumental piece, and starts with a strummed harp, and a flute plays the theme. For a while I was wondering if this would be a chamber work, but at about the 30-second mark, the rest of the orchestra quietly comes in. The piece speeds up and gets more vibrant in the second minute, still recalling the opening melody. The opening flute and harp theme is back at around the 2-minute and 30-second mark, and that's what I'm going to sample. The winds repeat it, then the lower winds repeat it again, and the piece ends high up with a music box chime before the final low chord. This is a creatively programmed album of music by turn-of-the-century Jewish composers in Vienna. But don't let the title fool you, there's nothing particularly Jewish about the music. All of these composers are working in the Germanic tradition of the time, and given the program, the Mahler movement at 24 minutes in length comes across as a giant sun that all of the much smaller planets orbit around. It makes up almost half the program and is programmed centrally. Korngold would be the other composer who gets most of the representation. All of the songs presented by him are Shakespeare verses in English, and they bookend the Mahler. I personally found the Zemlinsky songs to be the most interesting discovery, though I loved Korngold's Songs of the Clown. Zemlinsky orchestrates appealingly, and these songs come across with the affection given to them by Chen, Reiss, and the orchestra. I found her singing to be the sun around which this particular album revolves. She has a clear, strong soprano that lights up every track she sings on. The orchestra under Daniel Grossmann is fine, and they acquit themselves well in the Mahler, but they're at their best when they're accompanying Reiss too. It's an attractive album with lots of edifying and probably unfamiliar music to discover and enjoy.
The main attraction here for me were the gorgeous melodies of Korngold.
Yeah, he's great.
He's such an interesting composer. We've heard some far out things by him, too.
Yeah.
He was really versatile in all the different types of music he could compose. But with Shakespeare's text as lyrics in English, I can follow along and appreciate his matching of melody and harmonic tension with the meaning of the text. Chen Reiss phrases and sings them magically here. Often a full recording of just soprano voice can be a bit much for me because it can get shrill sometimes, but she has a warmth and flair that kept me really engaged. And the Jewish Chamber Orchestra, Munich, and Daniel Grossmann bring out the charms in the vocal works, and everything sounds well balanced, and I enjoyed the performance of the Mahler work as well here.
Yeah, we tend not to feature those more shrill sopranos on the adult music podcast. I sort of carefully edit them out. So if you're a soprano and your voice is heard on the adult music podcast, you should feel honored because we think you're not shrill. Okay, we have a fascinating release for the contemporary album of the week, an album of concertos by contemporary composers performed by Alexandre Tharaud on the piano. And we've been hearing him. He's a really versatile pianist, I have to say. He's done a lot of Baroque recordings. He's done romantic concertos. And now he's going into some pretty naughty material here with these three composers. The piano concertos are by Thierry Pécou, born in 1965, Ramon Lazkano, born 1968, and Alex Nante, born 1992. And there are three different orchestras accompanying Tharaud on the recording, and I'll mention them as they come up. This is on the Erato label, and it was released on April 25th. So tracks 1 and 2 are Thierry Pécou's Cara Bali Concerto for piano and orchestra, composed in 2020. Pécou was born in 1965, so he's as old as me. That's when I was born. Pécou remarks that traveling to Bali for post-war 20th century composers was like going to Bayreuth for late 19th century composers. And I remember reading myself about Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears taking a trip to Bali, and Britten came back and wrote works like The Prince of the Pagodas and featured a lot of Balinese gamelan techniques in his music after that. Mm-hmm. The percussive and hypnotic elements of Balinese music influenced the soundscapes of the American minimalist composers, for example, and a lot of others besides. Though Pécou has not yet been to Bali, it was the desire to create a musical bedrock from different Southeast Asian traditions to enrich the score of his opera Until the Lions, based on the great Indian epic The Mahabharata. Oh man, that's a major undertaking. I wonder how he got that into an opera. I'd like to actually hear that. And that endeavor, writing that opera, led him to the Indonesian gamelan. Inspiration for this work came from ethnomusicologist Michael Tenzer's books on the Balinese gamelan, Gong Kebyar, and from the Canadian composer Colin McPhee. He was also inspired by the overarching principles governing gamelan music, such as calotomy, which is the basic temporal cycle punctuated by the low gong on which every composition rests. The organization of the musical edifice by layers and registers also inspired him, and the virtuoso play of intertwined parts. Also, the harmonic construction derived from the unique 7-note pelog mode. Direct reference to Gong Kebyar is often explicit in this work. Personally, I don't know what that sounds like. I just know basically how a gamelan works in the most basic sense, so I'm not going to be able to identify that for you. If you happen to be a scholar, knock yourself out. You're going to love this. And I loved it myself. Track 1 is the first movement marked vivace. It starts with a repeating piano phrase circling up high in the piano's range. The similarity to gamelan is impressive here. Yeah, that part sounds like it must be fun to play once you get over the difficulty of playing it, of course, with that rhythm. Some modern harmonies creep in, as you heard, as I was fading out there, and they're very much Western by the sound of them. The rhythm is continuous in gamelan style until the second minute, when chiming sounds are heard in the piano as the orchestra, particularly individual brass instruments, get the melody. The orchestra plays sustained tones, often changing, again in imitation of the gamelan. Sections suddenly change, usually after pauses. Tharaud has some filigree work in the third minute before restarting the gamelan pattern. It's beautifully realized in the composition and a pleasure to listen to. In the fourth minute, winds start playing half-note chords, rocking back and forth, while various winds play filigree lines. I'm really enjoying all of the intriguing changes of approach. I also like the use of brass throughout the movement, always sounding colorful in a unique way. Inventive patterns follow on each other until the 8th minute, when the piano reestablishes a steady rhythmic pattern as the rest of the orchestra plays the wandering gamelan-like melodies. The movement crescendos to an exciting peak in the 10th minute. I should mention those gamelan-like melodies aren't wandering harmonically. They're just sort of sound sort of floaty, let's say, because of the mode. The piano gets the last quiet word, however. It's a really interesting movement. And there's one more, also marked Vivace, track 2. It also starts with a gamelan pattern in the piano. It's a different one. Let's hear this. Now already, by the time we reach the first minute, I love the subtle changes in the piano's pattern and the interplay of the orchestra. Low brass at 1 minute and 52 seconds are compelling. Listen in for rhythmic changes. They're subtle and are part of the continuity of the piece, so I really can't demonstrate them in a sample. At 3 minutes, the rhythm starts and the piano begins another, more crooked-sounding pattern. It then stops and plays something with a warmer bass at 3 minutes and 50 seconds. There's some tension building in the next minute as the piano simultaneously climbs and slows. Wild percussion and urgent piano chimes appear in the 5th minute, and I love the orchestration here too, so I want to hear that as well. You hear that bass come in. That's really, a Balinese kind of way of bringing it in. It's pretty wild, this section. Tharaud achieves an even, chiming, gamelan-like sound exceptionally well in his playing. Most of the themes in this work circle, and we hear such a theme in the orchestra, usually they're in the piano, in the 7th minute, as low brass play melodically and the piano plays a few lines that sound ad-libbed. At 8 minutes and 20 seconds, a quick repeated piano note starts a solo section for the piano. This would be the cadenza. It's expressive rather than virtuosic, although I imagine rhythmically it's virtuosic as well. I'm intrigued by the very high, non-sounding key he's hitting in unison with the supporting but also high keys playing the theme. Tharaud's touch is exceptionally light in this section, and the microphone seems to be spotlighting him as he's playing quietly, yet sounds full on the recording. Let's hear a bit of this cadenza. And the evenness of those scales is really astounding. The professional pianists really are amazing. The orchestra re-enters with murky low brass under low percussive muted bass note hits in the piano. This section sets a glacial rhythm in the orchestra, which the piano eventually starts tiptoeing over with slowly played high notes in the 13th minute. The music slowly crescendos over a 3+ minute span, with the orchestral colors gradually being added in. By 16 minutes and 30 seconds, the piano is playing a quicker gamelan pattern. There's a fantastic resolve with rumbling percussion at around the 18-minute and 30-second mark. The piece seems to be over, but the brass and strings play long sustained chords as the piano plays discordant chords that span the range of the keyboard. An exciting percussive pattern re-emerges for the last 20 seconds, and the work ends on a final chord. I found this concerto thrilling, excellent performances too, and astonishing technique from Tharaud himself. Track 3, Ramon Lazkano. He's a Spanish Basque composer, and I think he has French citizenship as well. Born in 1968 in San Sebastián, Basque Country, Spain. The work is called Mare Maginis, Nouvelle Lune, Concerto for Piano and Orchestra 2022. The Mare Maginis is a lunar mare, and the mares are the dark spots on the moon, and it lies on the very edge of the lunar near side, and that's where it gets its name, because it's on the margin of what we can see of the moon. It demarcates the visible from the invisible side of the moon, and in this work, the soloist manifests itself as a satellite orbiting around an orchestra that performs as an echo chamber, like the sonic aura of an inner emanation. Lazkano has also sought to evoke here various pieces from his pianistic youth that contain nocturnal references, so works by Chopin, Bartók, Debussy. The piano starts the piece, the damper pedal is up, and these opening notes don't resonate. The orchestra comes in with streaming crescendo tones that dissipate. Now, judging from the beginning, this is going to be a rough 25-minute ride, but the piece hasn't built up to anything yet, so I'm patient. Basically, at the opening, the piano has Morse code-like patterns, and the orchestra plays streaming held notes. I'm getting the sense of a solar panel receiving its energy from the orchestral planet. The orchestra has some intriguing sounds produced by extended instrumental techniques like harmonics and sul ponticello playing in the strings. I liked the brief pulse from the percussion at the 4-minute mark, which the piano picks up. And I'm going to sample that part. The rhythm kind of reminds me a bit of Rite of Spring by Stravinsky.
Right.
Icy light metallic percussion takes over briefly in the 5th minute, and the piano picks up their patterns, so now I'm getting the echo chamber reference in the composer's description. I'm now starting to hear the relationship between the piano and orchestra. This is about 5 minutes in. I should probably listen to this several more times to really pick it up, though. You could hear it in the percussion to piano handoffs in this sample. Now, by the end of that sample, that piano rhythm is really tricky. I really liked the orchestration in there, too. You noticed that there was sort of a unison, like percussion sound in the orchestra that I couldn't really isolate. but I just found that fascinating. I was really tuning into that. Things get a bit more lively and loud in the 8th minute with the piano hammering on bass notes. I'm getting a sense of the piano's percussivity in this piece, too. We heard it in the Pécou work, of course, because that's imitating a percussive ensemble. The material beyond the 10th minute remains percussive, but leaves more space between attacks. The piano is solo in the 12th minute, so I guess that section acts as a cadenza. The chords here are pretty wild-sounding and often striking, struck as strongly as they are. We should hear a bit of this. Maybe you want to turn your volume down a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so I could hear people saying, yeah, it sounds like my 3-year-old kid banging on the piano early in the morning. But it fits in with what's in the composition here. That's the difference, really. By the 13-minute and 20-second mark, the orchestra is quietly making its way back into the piece via atmospheric, lightly tapped percussion. In the 15th minute, the piano starts a heavy, scurrying motion, and the orchestra starts roiling. The piano's rapid repeated chords arise from the orchestral sound and crescendo, and then disappear back into that orchestral sound. Attacks from piano and orchestra get sparser again in the 17th minute. In the 19th minute, the orchestra erupts into a rapidly pulsing cacophonous section. The piano gets aggressive in response to the 21st minute. It decrescendos, and the orchestra is front and center, the piano pulsing back in via a repeated bass note. The piece quiets by the end, with the orchestra intriguingly playing what I think are harmonic violin glissandos. I should say, patterns change quickly, and this is a hard piece not only to know what to sample, but even to summarize. It's a challenge, but there are compelling timbral and dynamic combinations to keep you interested, and it's a piece that's going to require repeated listenings to really get what's going on. Tracks 4 through 9, Alex Nante, Argentinian composer, born in 1992. He's a pretty young guy. Luz de Lejos, or Light from Afar, concerto for piano and orchestra, composed in 2021. This concerto forms part of Nante's, I wonder if he says it Nante, I'm not sure, but I'll go for the French Nantes here, although he is from Argentina, so I don't know. It's part of his orchestral cycle on light. In this work, the piano can be seen as embodying a character passing through stages of getting closer to, as well as further away from, the orchestra and the light it represents. The idea was inspired by the difficulty of unifying the contrasting timbres of the orchestra and the piano. Also, notice the symmetrical mirror structure. The movements go calm, energetic, duet, and then they mirror each other, duet, energetic, calm. Track 4 is the first movement, Preludio, calm and meditative. I like the open fifths that open the piece on the piano, always a pleasing sound. A bassoon comes in for the first time, then an oboe, so intriguing scoring right away. Let's hear the opening. So the entire movement sounds introductory like that, and that's the way a prelude should be. There's a serenity to the orchestral sound by the end, while the piano plays agitated figures. What we're hearing are the seeds of the upcoming toccata. And that's the fifth track, the second movement, Toccata 1. It's energetic and in a Baroque style, the composer says. The piano here is far more active, as is the orchestra, which seems to comment on its line. The piano is busy in this movement. There are some quieter interludes where the piano plays even quarter notes. The piano actually has some pretty parts in the movement, especially in the last minute. But I want to hear some of the adventure, so let's hear the opening. The movement ends on a single hammered chord. Track 6, the third movement, Annunciación and Juego. It's a duet for piano and horn. The opening piano line has a clock tower chiming quality to its rhythm. Think Big Ben without the famous Westminster chime theme. The opening of this movement is serene. The horn in question is the French horn, and it plays long, serene tones like the ones composers like Brahms favored. And that's how the movement ends. I played the more agitated Juego part. Track 7, the fourth movement, Canción de Amor. It's a duet for piano and harp. This movement starts more serenely and gently still. The piano and harp are dancing side by side here. You'll have to listen in for the harp, though. Boy, now that Western composers have sampled like music from all around the world, the musicians are no longer afraid of these really complicated rhythms and these quick changes as well. Winds add some texture to this movement. This is the longest movement so far at 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The others were all under 3 minutes long. And the piano plays some poignant, confessional-sounding chord patterns as the healing sustained chords of the orchestra emanate out. By the fourth minute, the piano is alone, building up patterns, and sounding a bit like it's trying to let go of what's agitating it. There's a subtle sense of inner struggle. The rhythm in the piano builds up and launches it into the next movement, called Toccata 2. It's the fifth movement, track 8. It's energetic, vigorous, and powerful. It starts with streaming sounds from the orchestra and fairly aggressive filigree work from the piano. There's quite a bit of trilling in the high end and some hard-hit bass notes. The orchestration is compelling and the harmony is sometimes surprising. Let's hear some of the piano interacting with the orchestra. Those great bass notes on the piano. Track 9, the final movement, was called Luz de Lejos. This is the title of the concerto. It's the 6th movement. It's calm and meditative. It starts off meditatively in the strings, sounding serene after the piano drops out at the end of the previous movement. The piano eventually comes in with some gentle tones in the high end. I guess I could have let that go to the end. We're almost there. But the orchestra has most of the spotlight in this movement, with the piano serenely floating around it. The piece ends with a very high chord in the piano and a single staccato high slashed out violin tone, I think, allowed to decay to silence. I've got to hand it to Alexandre Tharaud for taking on these virtuosically and intellectually challenging works. He's got the intellect and sensitivity to put them across. For me, the work to hear on this program is Thierry Pécou's Caja Bali Concerto. I found the writing very exciting, with the Balinese rhythms expertly integrated into a Western formal scheme. Those rhythms give the two movements a sort of drive and lift the spirits in doing so. I'll be returning to that work often. Ramon Lazkano's single movement is long and knotty. It's a challenge, but had orchestration that maintained my interest. It stretches the brain without straining it. It may be a work that will grow on me. Like I said, I think it's got a lot of detail, and it's going to have several listens to really get to know it. The final Alex Nante work, I'll say it the Spanish way here, Luz de Lejos, has a lot of serenity that's broken up by more passionately played sections, and is a satisfying listen in itself. I'm glad to hear that the piano concerto is alive and well in our times. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing this program.
I think this is a recording I'm going to have to listen to some more. I only had one listen of it during the week, and there's a lot of dense material here to form an opinion about. The Pécou starts out with that gamelan rhythmic quality, which I found interesting. I remember the gamelan music recording we heard some time back.
All right.
An interesting concept to be applied to the piano here. I liked the first movement, and then the second movement got sort of out there with really interesting harmonies and strange orchestral sounds. And then that sort of set up the Lazkano, which was mysterious all the way through. And it held my interest by being really unpredictable with unusual timbres and techniques in the orchestral sounds. I was wondering what was going on a lot of the time to produce those sounds. So for me, the more instantly appealing work here was the Nante, and it turned out to be my favorite. I thought it was really charming, the use of orchestral timbres balancing out what was going on in the piano. So I really picked up on like the solo horn passages and then the harp and flute lines. I heard some bass clarinet peeking through in the fourth movement as well. And then in the fifth movement, there's those really big brass swells. And I kind of liked how that complemented what the piano was doing in interesting ways. And I thought the piano was really quite fanciful, not only in his playing, but also in the writing of the parts. So I was kind of intrigued from the start with that work. The other two are a little bit chewier, and I'll have to go back and have another listen. But definitely interesting contemporary works.
I think I want to hear that third concerto by Nante again as well. By the way, you mentioned the gamelan recording we heard. That was Brian Baumbush's Chemistry for Gamelan and String Quartet on the New World label that we heard in our appropriately titled 126th episode, Holiday in Bali, back on August 7th, 2023.
Wow, was it that long ago? Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that long ago. It's 2 years.
Yeah, still.
Yeah, but the time does really fly. I also want to mention, by the way, about this album. This is a good one to pair with that Eric Montalbetti Orchestral Works album that we heard back in January. If you want to pair it with something, could be an interesting and really intellectual listen.
We should probably mention, too, there's 3 different orchestras on this recording.
Oh, I didn't mention that. Oh, boy, let me say that because it was a bit remiss there. I said I would do it and then I didn't. The Pécou work is played by the Orchestra Nationale de Lyon, conducted by Jonathan Stockhammer. The Lazkano work was by the WDR Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Sylvain Camberling. And the Nante work is by Orchestra Nationale de Lille, conducted by Emilia Hoving. Sorry for that. I should have mentioned it with each individual piece as I said I would, but I guess I didn't include it in my notes. Ugh. The perils of podcasting.
All right, over onto the jazz side of the program. We've got 3 really exciting recordings for you. And the first one is going to be kind of a revisit back in episode 169, Boss Baritones and Prepared Pianists. That came out in June of last year. We heard a recording by this fabulous trio. It was WAW exclamation point. We weren't sure, should we call it WAW? Because that's how we felt when we listened to it.
Yeah, and I felt that way with this one too.
On Hobby Horse Records, the WAW comes from the first initial of each last name of the members. Carl Winther on piano, Richard Andersson on bass, and Jeff Tain Watts on the drums. And here we've got a new recording called Steep Steps from these 3. It came out April 25th, also on Hobby Horse Records. Now, Carl Winther is one of the top Danish jazz pianists, born in 1984. His father was trumpeter Jens Winther. He's played with musicians like Billy Hart, saxophonist Bill Evans, Tim Higgins, Adam Nussbaum, Marcus Strickland, and more. Richard Andersson is a very interesting bassist in his style of playing from Copenhagen, and Jeff Tain Watts really needs no introduction to jazz fans. I had the pleasure of seeing him play with Michael Brecker here in Japan. That was after they released the recording 2 Blocks from the Edge in 1997. So the collaboration of these 3 goes back to 2008, when Andersson and Jeff Tain Watts crossed paths at a jazz workshop in Denmark. And that encounter sparked a mutual admiration, and that would lead to multiple invitations for Andersson to continue playing on projects held by Watts. And Andersson and Winther had a separate collaboration, and they realized the potential for something unique with the 3 of them together. This recording is short like the previous one, and it seems to come from the same sessions as last year's release made in August of 2023. Nevertheless, the last one was so good that I figured we should definitely include this one because I knew I wanted to listen to it. So once again, the lineup: Carl Winther, piano, Richard Andersson on the bass, and Jeff Tain Watts on the drums. All tracks here are composed by Carl Winther except tracks 2 and 3, which I'll point out when we get to them. This was recorded at the V Recording, as I mentioned, in August 2023 by Rasmus Glendorf, and mixed by August Wangren in the fall of 2023. Mastered by Sophia von Hage and Thomas Eberger at Stockholm Mastering in the fall of 2023, and it's produced by Richard Andersson for Hobby Horse Records. The first track is super syncopation of a chord-couched melody on this tune. Listen for the extra tight bass and left-hand piano movement. Watts hits the accents of the lines and fills the gaps with high-energy drum fills. It sounds like a 40-measure construction that repeats, but then extends into something new. If you can remember the beginning figure you hear it get going again before the end of this sample. Just going around again and on to more new things from there. And Andersson is up first for a bass solo that sings out into the upper register. So let's hear his playing on this one. Really digging in there, and Winther follows, and his lines stay smooth even when they hit on snappy rhythmic figures into a climax of percussive chords. The melody head comes back around to take it to the end with a slight slowdown. Track 2 is a McCoy Tyner tune, Inner Glimpse, and this is part 3 of the Enlightenment Suite from 1973's recording Enlightenment. Watts brings this one in with the drums. It's an intense 32-measure minor melody. The first 8-measure section repeats, and then it takes off swinging over walking bass. They go around the whole thing twice. Thunderous piano chords and intense drumming drive the excitement. Let's hear this one get started. Off improvising from there, and he plays on and on like a man on a final mission. Let's come back for the exciting conclusion of his solo on this one. Andersson solos next, and Winther leaves them to play over Watts' drumming with a lot of rhythmic communication between the two. After that, Winther and Watts trade eights, keeping the intense energy to take it around the melody a couple more times into a vamping coda ending, and Watts lets loose on the drums underneath. Powerful and thrilling playing throughout this tune. Track 3 is Tad Dameron's Soul Train. This comes from a 1956 recording released in 1957 with both Dameron and John Coltrane under the name Mating Call. It's ballad time, and Winther gives this one a carefree rubato intro. I'll join in a little way in where the main melody starts and bass and drums join in. It's slow, so we'll just get around the A section of the 32-measure melody into the repeat in a 1-minute sample. Going around again, and you can hear some humming along in there as well. Demeron tunes have great chord changes, and this tune is a nice chance to hear Winther's voicings on something more gentle. Andersson gets to solo over the A sections of the melody, and his melodic ideas on the bass with great ringing tone are really fine. Let's hear some of that. Winther improvises over the B section and brings it back to the melody for the final A section and a lush ending. It's a nice intimate contrast to the previous tune. Track 4 are steep steps, and Jeff Tain Watts gets to let his sticks fly for almost a minute to open the title track up, so let's check it out. Let's continue on to hear this modal tune with steep jumps in the harmonies. Interestingly, the repeated melody phrase is 15 measures, so it creates a sense of driving ahead. After the little tag section at the end, Winther is off on improvisations. gets plenty of room to stretch out in this solo, which reaches another intense climax. Andersson follows, starting out with interesting rhythmic figures over just the drums and then working into more high-register ideas. Winther joins back in to push him on and works into more improvisational exchanges with Watts. I rarely play 3 samples from a tune, but since there are only 5 tunes on this recording, let's hear the final exchange here. To a final time through the melody with some really gnarly chords at the ending. And the recording ends up with track 5, another Winther original, Turning Chapter. This tune has a Latin beat. After an 8-measure intro, there's a 40-measure melody that has interesting exchanges of right-hand piano phrases and then answering left-hand and bass figures. After that, the next shorter section switches up to a 3-beat feel. Maybe that's the new chapter from the title. I'll play a long sample so that you can hear the transition. Andersson is up first for a melodic bass solo over both the 4-beat and 3-beat sections. Let's hear one more sample from Winther from the start of his solo, showing off a lighter touch and ideas that build up from previous phrases. works into those zippy lines and then over the 3-beat section and makes a rhythmic ending. It comes down softer with the return of the intro idea into a final run through the melody, and Watts gets to build up drum energy under a chordy extension of the 3-beat section to the end. And that's the recording. Just 5 tunes here, but there's a lot of variety. Winther is explosive when playing McCoy-Tyner-inspired minor modal material with thunderous chords and a real fervor in his solos, but we get to see a softer side with subtle chord voicings on Tad Dameron's Soul Train and in Winther's final original composition, Turning Chapter. Andersson's solos are always fresh and interesting both melodically and rhythmically, and he has a lot of tight integration with Winther's left hand that catches your ear on the bass lines to the melodies. When Andersson solos, Winther often leaves him just over Watts' drums, and the two have great rhythmic energy. Watts is a powerhouse as always, but he's versatile too, with light textured brushwork on the ballad. Overall, I don't think there is any piano trio out there that can outdo these 3 musicians in terms of energy and excitement.
Yeah, there you go. That was pretty much my summary too. I said almost the exact same thing, but with different words. Only 5 tracks, but there's a lot of music on them, I said. And most of that music is high-powered. We have that one central track that's a bit of a ballad. And Jeff Tain Watts drives the energy. He's high energy throughout the album, really. You can even hear his energy on Soul Train as well. And he delivers 2 ferocious drum solos on Inner Glimpse and Steep Steps. And Carl Winther gets a big tone and full harmonies using bass octaves to maximum plush effect. I liked his entire sound and the harmonics he got. It's really full sounding. He plays some pretty aggressive solos himself on the 2 tracks that I mentioned above, and Richard Andersson on bass is pretty outspoken himself and solos with harmonically wandering lines and accented syncopated phrases. I really liked the way he would get up top and sort of play these sort of syncopated repeating notes, and it was really interesting. All 3 musicians play well together, as you said, yet come across as strong individuals on the album. The 5 tracks include a ballad and 2 mid-tempo tracks as well as the 2 hot ones that I mentioned above. It's a complete album with complete musicianship on it. Those tracks are long. There's a lot to like in them. I think this is, this has to go into the collection.
Yeah, it's just thrilling playing. Really excellent.
Yeah.
All right, the rest of the program is going to be organ time, one of our favorite times. You could actually call it Hammonday, which is the name of the next recording. And this is on A.MA Records, brought to our attention by Antonio Martino, the founder of the label. And this is by the DIL Trio. And thanks to Antonio for sending us the notes and an advanced copy of the recording.
Did he say how to say that record label name? Because it's got an A period and then it's M-A period. So I'm wondering if it's A.MA or something like that.
I wonder.
I don't know. Anyway, I'm
sure he'll tell us. From the notes, quote, the 1960s are calling with Hammonday, the latest release from A.MA Records, recorded in Belgrade as part of the Serbian Wave. The DIL organ trio pays homage to the Hammond organ sound that punctuated the mod jazz and hard bop sounds of the swinging decade. I'm hooked already. How about you?
Yeah, there you go. 50s and 60s. That was really the golden age. And they had great sound then, too.
So the DIL name comes from the first initials of the players here who wanted to pay tribute to the Hammond organ trios from the USA and add their own flavors of Balkan spice. And as for the title of the album, the name Hammonday itself has a symbolic meaning for us. The notes say, Monday was our Hammond Day, dedicated for rehearsals, performances, and even after 5 years of the band's existence, the day for recording of this debut album. And hopefully our episode will go out on Monday too, making that another Hammond Day. So our lineup in the trio here: on the guitar, Dusan Petrovic; on organ, Irina Pavlovic; and on drums, Luka Jovicic. And we've got one guest on the last track, which is an alternate take, and that's American trombonist Corey Wilcox. This was recorded at Studio Strip in Belgrade, Serbia, April 2024. Recording engineer and mixing and mastering, all done by Milan Prokop. We're going to start out with Irina Pavlovic original You Move Me. And things get started with a cool groove on this minor tune. A pickup line leads into the first 16-measure section that's 4 times around a riffy unison guitar and organ phrase. There's an 8-measure contrasting section before a return of the riff with a different ending and a break into a final section of bluesy guitar from Petrovich. And then Pavlovich is off on an organ solo over walking bass lines. Let's hear this all get started. Now it's a major sampling sin to cut off a cool organ solo, so let's continue on to hear her playing, and don't miss the little Latin descending progression and rhythm switch up they add in. Solos from there with a clean tone and snappy figures, and classical fans will like his nod to Grieg with a little quote from In the Hall of the Mountain King, but with swing. Jovicic gets to do some trading fours with organ and guitar before they get back to another round of the melody with an extended final section for Petrovich to do some wailing and strumming. Track 2 is another Pavlovich original, Spy Walk. Another cool minor tune. The melody has a sneaky spy-like riff in the A sections. It starts with a 4th beat pickup, which makes the downbeat kind of ambiguous. It's in an ABA-B shape with a 12-measure final section that has fun, dangerous secret agent strumming from Petrovich. I'll give you a long sample so you can hear all of that. And Petrovich is off soloing from there. Let's check out some of his solo on this one. nice playing. And Pavlovich follows from there on organ. I really like the dark tone she's got set with the drawbars, making a more mysterious sound. Jovicic is really feeding the solos with nice kicks and fills. They bring it down soft and mysterious before a final time through the melody. Track 3 is Glede Pravo, which, as far as I can figure out, means look right. This is by Petrovic. This has a fast and happy samba beat and melody. After a tricky 2-measure pickup line, guitar takes the first part of the 46-measure melody, with the organ taking over midway through. Is off soloing first with bubbly lines and lots of fresh ideas, and Pavlovich has a sunny organ solo that gets some bluesy touches. They take it through the melody again and extend things with some vamping, first for more organ improvisations and then for Jovicic to get some drum work in. Let's hear what he does. Keep the vamp going and ended up with a variation on the opening lick to the tune. Track 4, another Pavlovich original, Lights Off. This has that relaxed cruising groove feel. Pavlovich starts it out on the organ with an alternating chord intro idea. Guitar and drums join in for a couple rounds with a clicky straight beat. The 16-measure melody sections start out the same but go in new directions from the 5th measure. Let's hear this one get started. Petrovich is off on a guitar solo after the melody that starts out chilled and gets to smoldering as it goes along, and Pavlovich takes the same approach, slowly heating up her solo. Part of the recipe for great Hammond playing is getting the right tone for the mood, and she's got it nailed here with a great shimmering sound. Let's hear the climax. And it's back to the intro idea for a couple rounds to a final organ swell. Track 5, another Pavlovich original. This is funky, so you've been warned. Get on your funky pants. It is a funky, clicky groove with a bit of Boogaloo that doesn't need much of a melody. It's in an A-B shape. When Pavlovich starts her organ solo, the chords are different on the B sections for a nice contrast. As she works it up to funky, choppy chords and some zippy lines, Petrovich adds some cool double stops in his lines of his solo, and the ending here is fun, with Jovicic getting in some trading before the final chords that go somewhere different. Let's check that out. Track 6 is an original by Petrovich, and I'm going to do my best here. Irinchetovo chukanye na chukovatso.
That's actually better than I could have done.
And I don't know what it means. And Jovicic gets an 8-measure drum intro to this boppy 12-bar blues. I like the loopy idea from the 9th measure. Let's hear it into the start of Petrovich's guitar solo. Yeah, fun bluesy solos on guitar and organ, and some trading fours with Jovicic before a couple final rounds of the melody. Track 7, Starigrad. This is a Petrovich original, and I believe this means Old Town. It's an interesting minor tune. First of all, let's check out the rubato intro that has drum tom rolls and great church-like organ swells under the guitar lines. Now, the melody is in an A-A-B-A shape with 12-measure A sections and an 18-measure B section. Let's check that out. Section there, and Petrovich is off on a guitar solo at the end of the melody. It comes across as a 12-bar minor blues with a bridge. Let's hear some of his playing. And Pavlovich has a subtle organ solo on this tune as well. Track 8, a Pavlovich original, Balkan. Now we're treated to some haunting vocals from Irina Pavlovich over some somber minor organ. Let's hear the opening. Yeah, that soft groove works into a subtle guitar melody. It sounds like it's alternating between 3-beat and 4-beat measures. Petrovich has a guitar solo investigating the minor mood. There's a little transition section to a very restrained drum solo from Jovicic. Let's check that out. Pavlovich has an organ solo too, and it ends with a haunting rubato ending, like the opening but without vocals. Track 9 is also by Pavlovich, What If? This tune is dreamy and has a pleading sense at the same time. I like how Jovicic builds it up with soft toms and how the guitar joins in unison at the end of the melody line. Well, the organ and guitar solos on this tune are subtle, and it works to a faded ending. And the recording ends up with an alternate take of Lights Off, the same feel and groove, but here with Corey Wilcox adding his trombone in, and I like the little sassiness he adds to his phrases. He takes the first solo on this version, so let's just hear a little more of his playing. Tone and wavering idea there. And that wraps up the album with this tune. There's definitely some soul in Serbia distilled into this organ trio. We get nice grooves with elements of great jazz organ trios of the past, and a mix of bluesiness and a bit of Balkan spice in the recipe. We listen to a lot of organ trios on adult music, and what made this one stand out are the balance of subtle, nuanced material to the groovier content, and a touch of humor in spots. Also, I enjoyed the program of all original compositions with tunes that have a variety of structures and different directions taken in the writing. Irina Pavlovich's organ solos cover a range of moods, and she has an excellent sense of getting the right organ tone for what she's expressing. Dusan Petrovich has a pleasing, clean guitar sound, snappy phrasing, and lots of fresh ideas that keep coming even in his longer solos. And Jovicic makes tight grooves and has solo spots to stand out throughout the recording. I had fun listening to this, and I hope they record another album soon.
Yeah, I think we're on the same jazz wavelength this week.
Yeah.
This is a surprisingly happening album in the first half and gets, slower in tempo as it goes on in the second half. The draw for me was Petrovich's tone, clean and sharp, as you mentioned. My ears perked up whenever I heard him starting a solo. The sound cuts through the recording appealingly, and Pavlovich on organ is soulful in the first half and plays with distortion in the second, getting a dirtier sound. I liked her clean tone in the first half, more, but it was pretty cool to hear that dirty sound too. She remains low-key in her solos in tracks 6 to 9, but steps out with more presence in the first 5 tracks. And where did she get that American soul? You hear some low, glowing, vibrato-laden gospel sounds from her at times. I like her sexy solo on Lights Off, particularly. Chochovich is modest as a drummer, but provides solid backing in his solos appealingly. This is a bit of a surprise and certainly an enjoyable listen.
Yeah, keep those great new releases coming, Antonio Martino. All right, one more organ-based recording, but let's double up the saxes with Christoph Grab and Root Area, and their new recording, In Pursuit of Happiness, on Lamento Records, came out May 2nd. Swiss saxophonist Christoph Grab studied at the Swiss Jazz School, Bern, in saxophone, composition, and arrangement. His teachers and mentors included Sal Nistico, Jerry Bergonzi, Joe Lovano, and Dave Liebman. He's currently active internationally with several different groups and projects, one called Blossom, another Reflections, and this one, Root Area. And Grab has been professor of saxophone and improvisation at the jazz faculty of the University of the Arts Zurich since 1998. So on this recording, Christoph Grab on tenor sax, Nicole Johentgen on alto and soprano sax, she's German, Marcel Thomy on Hammond organ, and Elmar Frey on the drums, who we heard back in episode 131, that was called Solo Septet and Symphonic Sounds from November 2023, with his recording 7 Colors, a drum-led septet in 60s style, and we really enjoyed that, and Christoph Grab was on that recording as well.
Oh, wow. I'll have to hear that again.
Yeah, it was a good one.
I didn't manage to get that one on a CD, though.
Yeah, that was one that was hard to get.
I think you have to contact him directly.
This album was recorded live in a single afternoon at Hard Studio in Winterthur on February 24th, 2024, recorded by Michael Brindley and mixed by Andy Neuresheimer. We're going to start out with a Grab original composition, the title track, In Pursuit of Happiness. And I'll tell you, Mike, I must have a nose for Boogaloo because I've sniffed out a lot of recordings in the past few weeks that have some Boogaloo. And that's what we start out with here.
I like it when the opening track is Boogaloo. It just kind of puts me in the right mood for the rest of the recording.
The drums and organ start out the Boogaloo feel with an 8-measure intro, and the main melody is a repeating 16-measure idea that features phrase exchanges between the two saxes. Don't miss the neat tonguing and harmonics into the next section that builds it up even more into hand clapping and harmonized sax riffing. This is all a lot of fun, so let's get a long sample of this start. To stop this, it's just getting even better and better. Drums and organ are back to support them with a popping bass line, and Tommy gets an organ solo with sax backing lines. Let's hear a bit of that into some more fun popping sax notes to set up the final melody section. All I can say is long live the Boogaloo.
Yeah.
Track 2 is a Nicole Johentgen original Sure. That's with a question mark and an exclamation point. This has a hypnotic drum organ groove in a 6-beat feel. Sax improvisations lead to a 16-measure melody with some modal spice. They've got vocalizations added into the lines, I believe, here. A triplet line leads to a sudden shift of 12 measures of 4/4 shuffle. Change there. It goes back to the 6-beat idea, and Johentgen is up for a solo with a searing alto tone and some interesting techniques. Let's hear the end of it back into the 4/4 section. Tommy has an organ solo from there with nice backing cymbal work from Frey. The saxes are back with the shuffle theme into a final version of the 6-beat theme. I like how the organ and drums drop out for a section, just leaving sax and voice, and don't miss the shout at the end of the tune. Track 3 is a Grob original, Soulmate. Smooth and sexy sax time for this one. Johentgen is on soprano here, and she has a really full tone. She starts it out with the 16-measure section, then Grob is in on tenor for a bit before they harmonize lines with a nicely phrased blend. melody is long and evolving with interesting backing ideas, switching from pulsing to legato phrases from Grab. Let's hear his solo here with a bit more edge to his tone. Follows with some nice pitch bending in her lines. The final melody section has the same nicely intertwined harmonized lines to a softening ending. Track 4 is also a Grab original, Black-Eyed Susan, and it's time to get swinging for this one. The first melody section is in an A-B-A-B idea with stop time on the A sections and traded sax phrases and weaving harmonized lines on the B. The second time through the B section, it gets extended for 6 measures into a whole new 32-measure melody idea with Grab's tenor in unison with the organ bass and Johannecken up high on the alto with some fun interval ideas. Let's check that out. Is off on an organ solo from there. Grub has a tenor solo bringing back the stop time idea. He really swings hard, and they connect it back to the first sax melody section to wrap it up. Track 5 is an original by Marcel Thomé, Bandworm, and Thomé and Frey make a really popping straight groove here starting from the intro. The sax melody is long with answering phrases and sounds like they have vocalizations mixed in here as well. Let's hear it get started. ideas to come there. Let's check out Tomi's organ solo on his own tune. Grab has a solo next on this one too, before a final time through the melody with some added sax improvisations at the end. Track 6, a Grab original inner song, an R&B feel for this one. Johankin plays an intro section before Grab starts the main melody and then hands it off to her. After 16 measures, there's an interesting 5-measure transition section with rhythmic tenor sax and organ bass together before the saxes weave and harmonize on the melody. And there's a final section of the melody still to come. Let's hear Johankin's alto solo on this one that has her starting out in the lower register. Great tone, and Grab follows with a solo that gets some edgier tone on rhythmic figures and a passionate climax. It works to a fade out with Johankin adding backing lines under him. Track 7 is Elmar Frey's original contribution, New Horizons, a cool samba groove here that starts off on the second beat. After an 8-measure organ and drum intro, the sax melody is long in an A-B-A-C structure of 16-measure sections. I like Tomi's throbbing samba bass feel on the B section. We won't get all the way through it in a minute, but let's check out the beginning. Henken solos first on this tune with snappy rhythmic ideas and speedy lines. They change up the feel and mood for Grab's solo and then bring the samba pulse back for some more sax melody. Frey gets his moment to build up some drum energy under vamping at the end, so let's hear what he does. Track 8 is a Grab original, The Clown. Kind of an Afrobeat reggae feel for this one. Frey gets to start it out. The melody has choppy traded sax phrases and fun harmonized lines. Grab and Henken both have fun solos on this one. And the recording ends up with a Grab original, track 9, The Flight of the Fading Beauty, a rubato and lush opening with rich organ from Tommy and a melody of traded sax phrases, nice cymbal decoration from Frey, and I like how the groove keeps changing up as it goes along with snappy organ bass. Cool 12/8 grooves going on there. Tommy has an organ solo first that builds slowly and gets sassy sax backing lines that turn rhythmic into a new sax section and then a solo from Grab. Let's hear one more from him as our last sample. saxes join back together on rhythmic riffs to bring back the opening rubato idea into a final rhythmic vamping section with sax improvisations. And that's the recording. This is a really fun recording that covers a lot of musical ground from Boogaloo, swing, and R&B feels to Afrobeat. The original compositions in the program have long and well-developed melodies that make the most of the interaction of the two saxes, trading off lines and weaving intriguing harmonies. Christoph Grab has an assured tenor tone and exciting solos with strong musical direction, and Nicole Johentgen has unique and superb tone on both alto and soprano sax and energetic ideas. I really enjoyed her playing. Marcel Thomé is very versatile on the organ, mixing up the styles with great accompaniment ideas and bass lines, and he has fine solos. He really locks in with Elmar Frey's intricate rhythms. A double sax organ quartet is a cool format, and Grab and Root Area have made the most of the instrumentation with great material and playing.
I really singled out Marcel Thomé on this album. He gets some unique sounds and even attacks out of the Hammond organ via his playing style, and he generates excitement in doing so. He's got interesting offbeat taste and phrasing that consistently keeps my ear on his playing. Christoph Grab and Nicole Johentgen interweave their playing appealingly, and each has a completely different tone and attack when they play. Johentgen more melodic and sweet-toned, while Grab is more outspoken and often staccato, with a big brassy tone out of the 1960s. And for this reason, it's actually pretty easy to tell them apart on the album without having to see them. Elmar Frey drives the grooves on these tracks with Thomé and makes them sizzle. I really loved the inclusion of a reggae rhythm on the clown, and this whole album had a high, positive energy, and it's certainly one I'll listen to often.
Yeah, I like this double sax with the organ format. It's really interesting, and their playing styles really are different but complement each other.
Right, they have different sounds as well, kind of, and they're playing different ranges too, but still, you can tell. They have different musical personalities, yet they interweave really well.
It ends up sounding like much more than just four people here. All right, that's going to wrap it up for episode 212. We've gone from Bach to Boogaloo in this episode, and as always, we want to say thanks to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we've got a menu lined up for 213 next week. What do you have on the classical menu, Mike?
I seem to have some kind of sacred and secular or angels and demons thing going on. We got in Baroque Nicolas Clérambault, two sort of choral works by him with soloists on the Château de Versailles Spectacle label. I think that's the first time we've ever done anything with them. So that'll be fun. We've got Yevgeny Sudbin's new recording of Scriabin's solo piano works. This is his second one, and he recorded the first one 19 years ago. So he's kind of finally getting back to this composer, so I was curious to hear that. And he's a pianist that we really like on this podcast. Last, I have an odd recording called Electric Fields, and this features Barbara Hannigan on vocals. Now, anything she's involved in is going to be very creative and probably a bit out there. This record seems to take Baroque and very ancient, like Hildegard von Bingen, melodies and sort of add electronics to them and pianos, and I don't know what this is going to be like. I'm very curious to hear it, but it's sort of an unusual one.
All right, sounds interesting. On the jazz side, I'm going with all piano, basically piano trios here. We're going to start out traditional with a new recording of Gershwin's music by a pianist who's very classy, Gabriel Lachin and his trio, and that's called The Man I Love. Then we'll go on to some more original music with Italian pianist Alessandro Autorocca and his recording Ash. And I think there's an electric bass on there as well, but I've got to get some notes for that recording before next week. And then we'll go to Sweden for pianist Matthias Landes's trio Resilience. And that's a little bit more adventurous and should be a challenging listen.
I'm looking forward to that. I want to hear what it sounds like.
All those recordings will be up on our Deezer playlist a few hours after this episode is published. We'll have a link to it on our Facebook page. Are you going to be listening on the commute tomorrow to work, Mike?
Indeed, and I'm already thinking about what I'm going to listen to. I'm really not sure, but it might be some jazz. I don't know. Sometimes it's Baroque. Baroque is good for the morning.
Gets the blood pumping.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for episode 212. We'll be back again next week. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.